Operation Old Man is a go. The White House is still cooking up new ways to hide or minimize President Joe Biden's advanced 81-year-old age. But it appears to be backfiring as Americans give another scathing assessment of his fitness for office. According to the latest survey, an overwhelming 81% say Joe Biden is too old for another term. We already know how his staff gives Joe the shorter staircase for him to board Air Force One, how they deploy an army of aides to hide his shuffling, and who can forget how they lace up the president in anti-slip sneakers as a way to prevent embarrassing falls. And now Team Biden is admitting that they police how many words the man can say.
The campaign is looking to shorten its speeches. Biden's general election strategy is less is more. The president's aides are seeking to tighten his pitch to voters with shorter, crisper speeches.
Our campaign believes in quality over quantity. We believe that these touches, these smaller things that are getting directly to the point about what is going on in the stakes of this election are going to be easier for voters to tap into.
Joe's old press secretary, Jen Psaki, says Biden should actually shun more traditional media interviews and have his ego stroked by media sycophants like Howard Stern.
What would your advice be to the White House in terms of his accessibility to press?
My view is he should come on The View before he does a press conference.
Thank you.
He should, because people want to have real conversations about issues that are happening. I think press conferences are important, but I also think him doing Howard Stern, that's an interview that reached a broader audience of people. Him talking to the guys from Smartless, which is a great podcast.
But the Trump campaign thinks the more Trump, the better. The former president revving up supporters at this year's Formula One Miami Grand Prix. All right, Jesse, I'll start with you. Isn't Joe Biden's campaign admitting that Joe Biden is incapable of campaigning the way a president should?
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats have gagged both candidates. They won't let Trump talk because he tells the truth, and won't let Biden talk because he tells stories about his uncle being eaten by cannibals. This worked, they think, because in COVID it made Biden look safe, and it made Trump look reckless, and it made the whole election more of a referendum on Trump and not a choice. But when you're president, you can't be kept away from crowds. You can't be kept to 6-minute scripted speeches to the camera. You're just going to look like a brittle, detached king afraid to face his subjects. So Trump goes out to Formula One. That takes courage, takes confidence, it takes a certain level of energy and relatability. And if Joe Biden went there, the risk would be too high. He could trip. He could get booed. You couldn't hear a thing. And if you ask me, in terms of voters being able to tap into something, I think it's more effective to see someone being able to work a crowd or a crowd work a guy than to just read something off of a script that a consultant wrote for you and then leave. American people see Donald Trump running for president and Joe Biden running scared. He's not even in control of his own campaign. He wants to talk. He wants to talk all day, and they won't let him. He's not even allowed to walk where he's supposed to walk. Trump can walk wherever he wants, can say whatever he wants. Joe Biden can't do either. Right. And now you realize why he's down in the polls. It's because everybody is realizing that Trump is more appealing, and he's eating away at Joe Biden's base. He's now ahead in both the 538 battlegrounds and the Real Clear Politics. Harold?
Okay, Harold. I'll go to you next.
So it's good to be back. He got out of the gates like Mystic Dan did. You came firing out of the gates here at the start of it. Well, I'll let you ask the question.
Well, really, I mean, if you think about it, if Joe Biden gets reelected, how is he going to run this country in the next 4 years if he can barely make it through this year?
I'm sure he'll figure it out. But I'd say this. Jesse pointed out a lot of numbers, and the last numbers are about the polling data from Real Clear Politics. I think you said 538. I was on another show this morning with one of the co-hosts of this show, her 9 a.m. show, and who I was paired up against, Guy Benson, made the point that President Trump is ahead in some of these polls, but when you look at likely voters, President Biden is ahead by, I think, 3 or 4 points nationally. But the other thing was a national poll also. So I think a couple of things. This race will be decided, according to Axios, by 6% of voters in Pennsylvania, which is not a state, the Commonwealth, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Arizona. Billions of dollars will be spent trying to persuade those people, that small group of voters, which is the case in just about every election. And I think what it really points to is the only certainty in this election right now is the uncertainty of the outcome. I don't differ with your numbers and your sense, and you certainly have a theory of the case about the race, but I think this thing is tight. It will remain tight. And I think one of the things, and we talked about it this morning, will be, and I'll be curious to hear the reaction around the table, is when the trial gets over here, and I think that'll be over sooner rather than later, and thus far I'm not seeing anything that would suggest former President Trump would be convicted. But when that is over with, I think the calls for a debate between these two candidates will only increase. And whichever candidate is refusing to, or seems reluctant, or is demurring about debating, I think he will face some polling data that shows that people want to see the both of them engage. And I've said those 3 dates, which I think are important: Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day. But even before that, if they don't get us a calendar for when they will stand on a stage together and debate the serious issues confronting the country and what they would do, to your point, Judge, over the next 4 years. This is the first time we've had two guys running who have been president in contemporary times. I think will be a decider in this race in a lot of ways. And whomever says they don't want to debate will be at a disadvantage in the minds of voters in those 6 states that are most critical.
You know, Dana, Trump is beating Biden in virtually every category: immigration, the economy, crime, foreign policy. And yet his team thinks the way to handle that is for him to talk less.
Their polling must be so bad. I mean, can you imagine? Like you can't tell me that they wouldn't prefer to have the option to send Joe Biden to the Formula One race and get cheered. That's just not realistic. I think Jen Psaki is giving them some pretty good advice. I mean, like, when you have not much, when the cards you have to play are the ones that they have, then yeah, you should go on Howard Stern and the Smartless podcast and call it a day and just hope that the basement strategy can go through. But a couple of other things is that you have all of these people that support Joe Biden saying he should do something else. So we've heard lots of different ideas for him. I'm guilty of it. I try to give ideas through the TV for everybody on communications. But Ro Khanna, the congressman from California, said, I think Joe Biden should go to the colleges where there are protests and give a speech. And I thought, under the Genocide Joe flag? I'm like, I don't know if that's going to work. And also, what about Kamala Harris? She was on a big college tour. What was her purpose? To talk about abortion. I don't think she was a former prosecutor. Does she not want to talk about college campus issues? Is she unable now to go and talk about abortion on college campus because they're going to be called Genocide Joe? There's a lot of things like that. The other thing is, I'll end with this. You mentioned like debates, right? Imagine the scenario that they want Biden to talk so little that they figure out an excuse and they believe that it's okay for them to say they're not going to debate Trump and they're going to move on. But what if RFK Jr. says, I'll debate Trump? And now you have the network saying, well, we got to have a presidential debate. And if RFK Jr. is on the ballot in these several battleground states, could make the difference for the election. Imagine that. You have RFK Jr. and Trump in a debate, and Biden's kicking it in Wilmington.
You know what, Greg? That's fascinating. What's your take on that?
Oh,
well, you know what? I think it's sad when your supporters want to see you less. I mean, if I really like something, I don't prefer to have it hidden unless it's a really bizarre fetish. But his handlers say their reasoning is they want quality over quantity with Joe, and it's like, how do you choose that with Joe? I mean, how do you choose quantity over quality when the substance itself is crap? Less isn't more with poop. It's still poop. And I'm sure when Trump showed up at Formula One, the media accused him of being all about race. But I want to mention the polls to you. Trump is leading in inflation, crime, border, foreign policy. These are all things that are measurable. Biden has an edge in the unquantifiable, which is the personality, hence the trials, which the media can shape a narrative over, minus the numbers. But what can be measured by the population, by your ears and your eyes, is function. You know, it's like pornography, you know, when you see it. And the more opportunity there is to see it with Biden, the worse it gets, which is why they're trying to localize it like mold in a basement. It reminds me of me when I played Little League. You know, the more options I had to participate in the game, the worse it was for my team. So they had me play one inning in right field, and then I could pinch run for the fat kid. That was it. They kept me out of the action, but they wanted me to feel included in all of this, which made me feel good. Meanwhile, Trump is out there, right? Even when they're trying to hold him back, he's out there. He's the most transparent candidate on earth, the reverse of everything the Dems have been saying. In fact, it's the Dems who are now functioning under this veil, this lack of transparency. And I think it's why Trump was able to tell you everything about how stuff works. He can't be behind the scenes. He is the scene. Meanwhile, Biden has to hibernate. And it's just the irony of saying how secretive and false Trump is. But Trump put himself in a glass cage. He can't hide anything. He accepted that role. He embraced it. Biden got the role, and he's running, as you say.
I want to hear more about you in right field.
I want to know what they call your league now.
Oh, that's true. What do they call a little league?
I don't know.
Little League.
Oh, really?
When they were youth.
I played little pygmies.
Yep.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.